Hey everyone, welcome back to the deck builder tutorial. I don't know what to call this. Ideation, watch over my shoulder video series. This is episode 3. In the last 2 episodes, we came up with an initial concept for an asteroid mining deck builder and went through the different pieces of how that might work. We then started creating different cards and tiers and putting them in Card Creator. We started trying to figure out how many cards we want in a set. And today what we're going to be working on is the event cards. I call them event cards, but I'm sure they have a better term that I don't know. I'm not super versed in this community, to be honest. But the delay opponent cards, the reset or change the store cards, draw additional cards, and mimic card effects. I don't know what we're going to call these cards yet, but that's where we are today. So let's go ahead and we'll just split that off. And we'll come back here. One of the things I mentioned in the last video is that we're already at 158 cards. And what I would really like to have is no more than 156 cards in the set that someone buys. It's like 3 playing card decks of cards. And so we're already over that, and we're going to add some additional cards. So we're going to have to shrink this list a little bit to make it work a little bit more effectively. So let's just start with some really basic names. At some point, we're gonna have to come up with some better names for all these things and some lore and some interest before we start working on the artwork for these cards. But even before that, we still need to work on card effects. So that's something else that we might work on today. So let's start with a reduce opponent card draw card. Opponent draws 1 less card on the next turn. So they go from having 7 cards in their hand to 6. That can reduce their ability to trade cards in to purchase things. And so that could be potentially helpful. I wonder though, with a 7 card draw, if it would make more sense to reduce by 2. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on that. I'm a little bit mixed on that, but I think going from 7 to 5 makes it much more noticeable when this card is played, and this card would be much more valuable. We'll also have to set a value for these cards in terms of trading value. I'm also wondering if it makes sense to allow for a 1-to-1 trade. So being able to trade better explosive charge for a better engine. Does that make sense to you? Let me know what you think about that in the comments. So we have the reduce opponent card draw. We'll want that to probably be a precision level card. We probably don't want too many of those to be in the deck. So let's start with 4 for now. The shop close was kind of an interesting idea, but I don't think I'm going to do that. Reset the store makes sense. And we'll make that one just a refined level card. And what it does is option to discard and redraw the store. So now this would speed up that other victory condition, basically. So one of the end game conditions, not victory conditions, one of the end game conditions is that if the store runs out of cards, the game is over. So if you have a reset the store card in your deck that you've built and you pull it, and let's say your deck has been refined really tight, really small, and so every 3 turns you're going through your cards. So every 3 turns you're basically discarding the entire store and getting a fresh set of 7 cards in the store. Then we could burn through these cards pretty quickly and have less turns. And so that might be a tactic for someone who already feels that they have victory assured, that they've that maybe they've only gotten 1 void opal back to earth, but they feel like their opponent's gotten 0. Let's burn through the store quickly so that we can end the game and I can win. It just creates that interest as well. And if we make it a low value card, it's easy to buy, and if we don't put too many in the deck, it's not likely to come up all the time. So in some games you might get it early, in some games you might not get it at all. So it could be an interesting way of forcing a win. Draw additional cards. We might actually add that to some of the upper tier versions of these cards, and then mimic card effects. So when I think of this, I always think of the replicator. So let's actually call it that just for fun. So the replicator is an exotic item. Oh, the precision item. Copy the effects of another card for this turn. So now let's just add 2 of those in. And so now we have a card where, you know, if you pick that up, you know, maybe there's an advantage here of you need another best robot. You know, you can use that this turn. You would have 2 best robots, and then you could trade them both in as though they were both exotics and get something better. So there's an opportunity there to help with upgrading to the next thing. And then maybe there'll be other opportunities with the different effects that we give cards to make that replicator much more interesting. I don't know if precision makes the most sense or if it should be refined. Especially if we don't have a lot of them in the game. They shouldn't be too game breaking, but you know, you might just use it for like drawing extra cards. You might use it for, you know, reducing your opponent's card draw. Yeah, could be interesting. So what are we at total now? 166. So how do we figure out which cards to reduce? So typically I would reduce exotics as much as possible, like the highest tier cards. But because we've decided that we want the, you know, whoever wins 5, like secures 5 void opals first to be one of the things, we need to be careful about getting rid of exotics. That means that we have to really reduce down the number of refined and precision cards that are available. So let's go ahead and look through this list real quick. Maybe we drop 2 of those and drop 2 of those. I like the robots where they're at. Let's drop that down a little bit. Let's drop that down a little bit. We're not going to adjust the exotics because we got to be careful with that. Did I already accidentally do that? I don't even know. We'll have to go back and double check. Excavator, rover, round trips. See, this is such an important card. I don't necessarily want to reduce that one. We've decided that we wanted 2 of each of these because really we want each player to be able to build their own ship at any tier, right? So if you build a whole, you know, good cockpit. Actually, we wanted more round trips because we wanted to use round trips as a way to like pay for a ship that wasn't complete. So, you know, this is a complete ship, and the tier of your ship is related to the lowest tier of the component. So if we had an industrial engine, but everything else was refined, oh, that's funny. We would have to pay an additional round trip to be able to send this ship back to Earth to drop off the void opal and bring it back again to be able to make that happen. So we'd have to have 2 round trips in our hand. If we had, you know, this one also like that, we'd have to pay like 3. So 1 initial one for it, and then these 2 additional ones. It doesn't upgrade the ship. It just makes it so that it can actually do its job, so to speak. So it doesn't give it additional storage. It doesn't give it additional power or life support. It doesn't count for any of those kinds of things, but it just allows the ship to deliver the void opal back to Earth and come back again. So we're going to need additional round trip cards, which is really going to throw off our numbers. Okay. So how do we just give up on that limit? Do we reduce the number of items that we have in the game? I like having the miners, and actually let's change that because having it say guy has kind of been bothering me. It's not necessarily going to be guys. The art's going to be different than that. Do we get rid of some of these things? Like, do we need the excavator rovers? Maybe we just have minecarts and gravity sleds. Maybe we get rid of minecarts and excavator rovers, and that would give us a fair number of cards back. And then it sticks with the sci-fi theme of gravity sleds. So let's do that instead. So one of the things that I often do when I'm working through this stuff is create a new tab and toss things in there that I remove. This is so that it's like, you know, gone but not forgotten, so to speak. So let's get rid of the excavator rover. And I accidentally put gravity sled there. So I fix that in here because that way later on I don't mess it up even further. Okay. So we've taken out 16 cards. Where are we at? 148. So that leaves us with 8 cards remaining. Would it make sense to have more round trips? They're going to come up fairly often. They're going to be used for 2 different things. Or do we want to add some additional other cards? Not sure. Let's just leave this alone for now. I'm just going to put it way down here. And we'll come back to this if we need to. But for now, we can just kind of hold it off to the side and know that we have a maximum of 8 additional cards that we wanted to kind of stick to for this. So the next step would be typically I would adjust card creator, but we're not going to do that yet. We're going to, let's say we'll work on the card effects. So the best way to go about this is to try to think through synergies. We've already decided that you can only have the number of miners that your life support can hold. And we've already decided that, let's open this back up again, that each tier kind of has a value to it. Industrial is worth 1, refined is worth 2, precision is worth 5, and exotic is worth 12. So that's pretty big swing, right? I don't think anyone's ever going to have 12 miners because there's only 10 in the game, but it just kind of gives that cap, right? So like if you wanted to have more than 5 miners, you would need to have an exotic life support system. So I don't know that miners are necessarily going to have any special card effects, but life support definitely does. So you field crew based on life support. So the industrial life support will so now we have life support. So initially when you start the game, you're going to have a miner. You can't add any more until you get refined life support. And you might not want to just immediately go to a refined life support, because if you purchase a regular industrial life support, you can put that on your ship outside of your deck and outside of your draw, and it'll stay there and you can cash it in. So basically when you pick up your 7 cards, you kind of have an 8th that you can then use for buying better stuff. So that to me feels right. And you're only going to have 1 life support. And yeah, I think that works okay. So maybe we don't even worry about, you know, creating a limitation for the industrial. No, we have to. I want to make sure that people know the intent here. And you can only have, you know, we'll make it so that you can only have these like 5 spots basically to build your ship. Like you can't put in multiple storages, you can't put in multiple powers, you can't put in multiple life supports. So let's write that down somewhere really quickly. I'm going to put in play because I think it's still fair that someone buys 2, let's say, industrial life supports or refined life supports, right? And you may be thinking, but then the other player can't get a refined life support. No, they're going to have to purchase a precision or exotic life support, and that could be used as a delay tactic in the game. I feel like that works okay. I've made it so that you could have one of each of these things at the different levels, but you might have to skip a level if the person you're playing against is a big jerk and is using the store to like try to stop you from having a ship to return opals back to Earth. Which makes me think that there could be a fun one-time use card, but nah. I was thinking maybe I do a one-time use card where it's like you can teleport an opal back to Earth even if you don't have a completed ship. But I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. I don't know that I necessarily want to go down that road. So what can good miners do that regular miners can't? Or better or best? We're really creating a trade system, but they don't really do anything on their own. And same with robots. Like, what do they do? What is the advantage of having a best robot or a best drill or a best explosive charge or like best gravity sled? We'll need to figure that out, because this stuff, right? So the cockpit doesn't really matter so much. The engine doesn't really matter so much, but the storage limits how many void opals you can bring back to Earth in one trip. Life support limits how many miners you can have. No, I don't mean young people. I mean people in the mine. Power will limit the number of drills you can have or play in a turn. So how will that work? I pick up my 7 cards and I don't have any power yet. And so I discard. That doesn't seem super fun. How do we make that fun? Right? And we were thinking that we would use these numbers 1, 2, 5, 12 for these things. Right? And so if I say that you can only, maybe I need to make sure that you start with a industrial ship. You start with an industrial ship, then you'll be able to play like a basic drill and a basic robot and a miner in a single turn. And by playing them, I mean being able to like trade them in as currency. Or what if power, whatever power tier you're at, you can play those cards, like you can trade those cards or below into the store. How does that feel? I still think I might need to give the player an initial ship. And you'll be able to trade as many industrial cards into the store as you want. But if you don't upgrade your ship, you can't trade in like the more valuable cards. Does that feel right? I don't know. And does it make sense to have, like, what would the cockpit do? What will the engine do? Maybe the engine reduces something. Like, the more powerful the engine you have, the less the fewer round trip cards you need. That could be interesting, right? So we still got to give everyone a starting card of an industrial ship. And so by default, it takes 1 round trip card. Keep saying return home. Right? So you can play 1 round trip card and you can bring a void opal home. If your ship is out of whack and you're supposed to pay extra round trip cards, having a stronger engine can reduce that or remove that. So how do we build that out real quick? So let's grab this again. I'm just going to play down here a little bit to try to figure out how this might work, right? So get rid of all this stuff. Okay. So we have a cockpit, an engine, a storage, power, life support. Let's assume that these are all industrial scale for now. So in this scenario, it takes 1 round trip to bring a void opal home. Now you've secured your victory point. Isn't that great? Now let's assume that you have updated your storage to refined and your engine to refined. And so normally it would take 3 additional round trips to go home. But, which would be really hard to get, right? You'd have to have lots of draw cards and you'd have to be really lucky. You have to buy a lot of round trip cards because you only start with 2. But now you can, if you can get back to Earth, you can secure 2 void opals in 1 turn. But because you have an upgraded engine, let's assume that it takes away that many. That means if you have a precision engine, then you can always get back to Earth. If we just do 1 for each level, then that reduces the chance of that. So refined engine equals -1. Precision engine equals -2. Wow, I wish I could spell today. Did I select the wrong spelling? Okay. Exotic engine equals -3. So now your game plan would be to upgrade your engine as fast as possible to reduce the number of additional round trip cards you have to pay to secure your thing. But we have power and life support that creates other issues. And what can we do with the cockpit? If anyone has any ideas on what we could do with that component, that'd be super interesting. Otherwise, I might just drop it and just do engine, storage, power, life support. And then we're kind of keeping everything to 4s, which makes things potentially easier. I don't know. Like maybe the cockpit is a gimme, and then I can remove that card. What do we think? I think that might be a good idea. We're gonna do the same thing though. We're gonna put it in the archive for now. Look at that. I just gave myself a whole bunch more cards that I can actually add back to this deck to make things more interesting. Yes. Yes. Okay. So now this would take 2 to secure 2 void opals because those are not upgraded for a total of 3. But if you ever, because they have a refined engine, right? So you mine these 2 void opals, you're ready to return them to Earth. You don't want to have to wait multiple turns. You just drew 2. Yeah, that could be useful, right? And then if you were to do, if you had a precision, if you had an exotic engine, then you're kind of golden in a way. Now, do we do anything about, let's say I have an exotic storage. I could now like send back to Earth like all of the void opals that I need to collect in 1 turn. And we have an exotic engine and exotic storage. Does that matter? Because power and life support will have other limiting factors in why you would want to upgrade them, and it would reduce the amount of return, like round trip cards you would need to get. And round trip cards are at a precision level, so you need to trade in, multiple refined cards to get them, or trade other precisions for that precision. What about trading down? Does that make sense to people? Like if I have an exotic gravity sled, right, and that is worth 12 points, basically of value, I can get 2 precision cards. Does that make sense? Would people want to do that? guess so, right? It's a thought. Yeah, that could happen. Why not? So knowing what these values are, I think as much as I hate it, it's probably worth putting these values somewhere on the card so that people don't have to go and look at a lookup table like I've been. They can just look at the card and go, oh yeah, that's worth 12 or that costs 12. And I, to do that, I need to get like 3 precisions to be able to purchase that one exotic. Yeah. So I'll have to make room on the card for those values at some point. I'm going to make a note to myself in this crazy sheet that I'm building out here. And actually, I'm going to put that back up with the actual, so that way I don't miss it, because I think that's important in terms of the design of the cards, which makes me go back to, we could use a symbol or color to kind of delineate those different rarities. And then that way, those people that automatically remember the value of them just look at the color or the symbol, and know right away. But I think it's worth putting the values of every card on them. It's not exactly what I want to do, but it just makes the game easier to play, in my opinion, when you know what the value is. We got rid of mine carts and we replaced them with gravity sleds. We kept explosive charges. We still have drills. We still have these, but they're now miners. Okay. So I think that gives us a good start there. So I don't know yet how I'm going to that on the card. Oh, something like this, right? Maybe I could put something like that. So one of the things that we were discussing before was, what do we do in a situation where someone has these, like the engine as an exotic and doesn't upgrade other things? And do we want to have, like, the further apart that they are, the more cards you want to play? I don't think so. I don't want to make this confusing. I want to make it pretty simple and just a little annoying, but not like super annoying. So I think we'll keep it something like that. So this one's by 2 and this one's by 3. So if you upgrade to an exotic engine, you have to pay a lot less round trip cards to compensate for mismatched components, and you're more likely to be able to take void opals back to Earth more easily. So let's take a second here and think through how many exotics we have, how many void opals we have, and does that feel like enough to make the game fun? I get them all the exotics. I could be really smart and I could color code these to make it easier on myself. So currently we have 16, which means there's a total of 8, and we're saying that people need to get 5 to win, which would be super difficult, but not impossible. Does that feel fun enough to do? I just don't know. I think it'd be more fun to be able to have more void opals, which means we would need more exotics. I even selected ship components, didn't I? Okay. Do I do it first to 3? Does that seem right? It reduces the interest in the storage, because my intention with the storage was always that it limits how many you can bring back to Earth, right? And I would love to have it where someone upgrades to exotic storage and brings 12 void opals back to Earth. That would be really neat. Do I do a 1-to-1 exotic to void opal? Right, so you purchase this by upgrading, and then on your next turn, you can trade it in for a void opal, or it has some crazy cool effect that maybe, oh, you want to keep it a little bit longer. How many void opals could I create? So I have 16 there. So if I do 28 void opals and I make it so that it only takes 1 exotic per void opal. Then what does that give me? So do I have to increase the number of exotics? Yes. But I'm at that 156. Dang it. I really wanted people to be trying to bring back like 12 at a time or 5 at a time or whatever. What if I do 20? That leaves me with 8 cards. And I could do maybe like that and like that. And like that. What does that give us now? And again, I don't want to trade in these pieces to get it. So now we have 16. I mean, people could, right? People could trade in these other things for them. That'd be a very strange move to make, but it is possible. So we want to account for that as much as possible. So now we have 16 that could go back, which is more than 12, which is kind of neat. I mean, maybe we just make this 10. So you'd have to have a precision ship, and you'd have to pull on 2 separate turns the round trip. And maybe for round trip, maybe you can only do it once per turn. So that's interesting. Because if you pull a bunch of round trip cards and you only needed 1, and then you're discarding them and you know you don't have any others, and you got to wait a while to get your round trip again, which is like, what else can I do kind of thing. So that's what we'll do. We have 156 cards, which is my 3 decks of 52. And that seems like a good amount of cards for a game. So again, let's imagine it through. I will have to add it to the card creator to get all these in place so that I can do like a print and play prototype. Or one of the cool things about this software is you can actually do tabletop simulator outputs. So I can put it in tabletop simulator and try to like see how this plays a little bit better. But I'm going to put the cards in card creator off camera. So that way next time we can go maybe right into tabletop creator and take a look at how it feels. All right. Thank you so much for watching, everyone.